First of all, welcome everybody. My name is Fred Rode. I'm the CEO and founder of Heavy Chef. I'm very, very happy to have Mayuri Reddy on the call today, whose recipe is live today. And I'm super stoked because I just had a sneak preview and it's looking gold. It really is awesome. And I can testify that you are a seasoned storyteller just by the way that you responded to the questions. And I don't know, you should be in podcasting or something. Oh wait, you are in, and you're basically a strategist, a storyteller, and founder of the Founders Atlas. And I'm very, very happy to host you today on today's conversation. Mayuri, welcome. First of all, how are you and where are you?
Hi, well, thank you so much for everyone who is on the call. I'm good. Right now, I'm based in very rainy and cloudy and depressing Berlin. Although I do love Berlin when it's this weather, I think that's actually where it thrives. And yeah, I'm happy to be here and be able to chat with all of you about something I really love talking about, which is storytelling and brand, and something that I think is incredibly important for any business that is looking to flourish in today's world.
I'm really doubly stoked to have you on the conversation today, particularly because we are on the cusp of launching this beautiful book that is a labor of love from the entire Heavy Chef team. And it's called Storytelling for Small Business. And it is available at exclusive books on Takealot and Loot, Amazon, just about everywhere that you can buy good books. And I encourage everybody to either go and buy online or to go to exclusive books or to attend our either one of our two launches in the next 5 weeks. And Mo, if you wouldn't mind just dropping the links for those for those launches, they're going to be super fun, and we've got lots of surprises in store. So Mayuri, you feature in the book, and part of the recipe that is going live today is actually included in one of the chapters. And it was such a good listen, because I think in terms of when I listened to the recipe actually earlier today, your passion for storytelling and your knack for looking at the strategy, the practicality, and the narrative that is so important for small businesses really comes through strongly. So I want to just quickly, before we get into the real kind of meat and bones of it, can we just talk a little bit about your background? Where did this kind of passion for storytelling, particularly as a tool for connection, originate? Where is it from?
Yeah, I think my passion for storytelling came from navigating my own identity and my own story as like even as an Indian American growing up. So my parents, they left India in their 20s. They decided that it would be more exciting and interesting for them to live in the US, where there appeared to be a lot more opportunity and a chance for them to build out their own life and their own story and their own dreams. And that led to my brother and I being born in the US and building our own life in a country that didn't necessarily have very many people, at least at the time, that were kind of looking like us, that were older than us. So we kind of had to build our own identity of what it meant to be Indian, culturally, American in nationality, and navigate what that meant for life for us. So we had the stories we were told by our parents about what it meant to be a person, what life was like, and we had what we were actually around us of the culture that we were absorbing. And I had to then kind of make sense of that. Okay, well, I think this way, but my family thinks this way, and our culture says this in India, but our culture in America says this. And I think as a really young person, I always was trying to navigate what that meant for who I was. And I think that somehow instilled a curiosity in not just my own story, but other people's as well. I've, from a very young age, been very just excited to understand why we're all different, and been excited to do that in a way where I saw that that's actually something that makes us a unique, makes each of us unique, but also can be used as a way to really catapult not just a person from a person's business, but also the way that they show up in the world kind of overall. And over time, that turned into something that went kind of weaved into the work that I did. So I started to see that, okay, if my curiosity about somebody kind of innately is there, I wonder how that innate curiosity can then be translated into how a entrepreneur or a business then shows up in the world and how they then tell their story. And it kind of created, unknowingly, storytelling became part of the way that I became a better marketer. So I then tried to use storytelling as a way to tap into that kind of desire for humans to connect with one another, to how they connect to a product, or how they connect to a podcast, or how they connect to one another at an event. And I just started to see more and more that that unique thing that we each have, our own story, can be one of the greatest ways that we connect to our consumers or our clients as well. I hope I answered that question correctly.
It's a great answer. There's a beautiful reference in the recipe where you talk about your brother and your mom celebrating Diwali and selling tickets to to events when you guys were young. And I think it resonates because that somehow threads through to the way that you think around brands and brand building today. And I think why it's so important. So, I mean, I guess the question is, why should entrepreneurs care? It's one thing to sort of, make a statement as a kid or, as a mom celebrating culture and identity within a certain environment or context. But I think, I have many opinions about this, but I want to hear from you, Mayuri. Why should the small businesses in our community really care so much about storytelling when there's so much else to really focus on, operations and finance and raising capital and execution, sales, the human side of things. And I think this, for me, is the reason why we wrote this book, is because it seems to be forgotten. It seems to be a forgotten element. So why should we care? Why should we care a lot in this day and age?
I think it's a great question. And I think the core reason why somebody should care about their story and why this needs to be important is it's your key differentiator in a competitive market. Your brand story and your story is your competitive moat. Nobody else is ever going to have that. In a world like now where somebody can go on ChatGPT or Perplexity and type in, create a business with A, B, and C brands that appeals to this user story or that user story or this type of client, someone can make a business plan in 5 minutes. The thing that's going to differentiate you from anything that can be replicatable is your story. That is the thing that people are going to be coming towards and people are going to gravitate towards. Because whether you are creating a deodorant, like Mo was just talking about, a brand that him and his partner have been using for a while, it's a small business, or you are creating an app that helps people learn a specific language. There are so many people that could create something that is similar. What people are going to again be gravitated towards is the story of the entrepreneur and why they created it. And if you don't have a story, you don't have anything connecting you to that person, to you, it is very easy for somebody else to come by and be slightly different and then take that customer or take that consumer away. So at the end of the day, every single person is connected to another person through, what makes us unique, right? Like that's at the core of what makes us human is storytelling. And if you don't build that into the way you're building your business, anybody could replicate what you're doing and take it away. That is your USP. It's your story. It's your why. It's what makes you you.
I mean, it's as old as the hills, right? As a species, we have risen to the top of the pile on the back of the fact that we, over and above any other species, can can tell stories. You know, we can relate to other people, other tribes, other humans, you know, other individuals, other collectives, groups, nations, a story, whether it's about us as a singular identity, as an individual, whether it's as a collective of two, whether it's as a mission, or whether it's actually as a country. The thing that differentiates us is the story, and whether, I guess, how believable that story is, right? So I suppose, I guess, you know, you mentioned AI, and this is the obvious pivot. And I think, you know, we didn't really spend a huge amount of time in the recipe of AI, but I think, you know, the conversation is just deafening at the moment. And so I think recently with the latest release of Sora, you know, I saw Casey Neistat did a video. I don't know if you saw it, where, you know, he showed a video of himself in all different scenarios, but it wasn't him. You know, the Sora just like within seconds created a simulated version of Casey Neistat, one of the biggest, you know, YouTube personalities on the planet and one of the OGs of the industry. And his term, which I think he might have, because it was right in the beginning, and it suddenly has taken, his term was slop. He says, like, the AI is now producing slop. It has the ability for brands to produce literally thousands of stories, these slop stories, basically just absolute nothing stories, which are, you know, being churned out every single day, right? And with the rise of AI, how should we be thinking about, and I mean, I guess this is you know, it's an open-ended question, but how should we be thinking about our own stories with the advent of AI? Do we regale against it? Do we use it? Where on that continuum do we sit with regards to using AI in our storytelling narratives?
That's a great question, because I think what I'm starting to see, I'll tell you what I think how AI is great and where you can use it. I'll tell you then what I think is currently happening, and then I think where people need to actually be. So AI can be an incredible tool for you to support your business, right? Like, truly, I think I think Sam Altman has already said this, that we are not far away from the first billion-dollar one-person company. The AI tools are incredible. They allow businesses to really create multiple functions with key information, but AI is also only as good as what you feed it, right? AI is a tool that requires real human kind of data points and knowledge to be as good as what it can kind of churn out, right? So if you put an incredible prompt into Sora, you can get a Casey Neistat video that is similar to what he's produced. You could also put in a very basic prompt into Sora, and you are not going to get the same output, right? It is, again, I think a lot of people think AI is just this magical box, but it is really only responding to what its input is and context that is provided. And that's what humans are really good at. We are great at context. AI is not yet there. And I hope that, you know, maybe it will get there, but as of right now, AI is only as good as what we put into it. Now, AI can be great for you to operationalize a lot of things. You can create agents that automate certain processes for you. You can take, you know, for example, maybe you have one piece of content from a podcast, and you could turn that into multiple Instagram posts, an article on Substack, articles and posts on LinkedIn, scripts for you to create on TikTok, right? And again, the instructions that you give it allow for that content to be turned into really great things. So use AI. It's good if you use it the right way. The problem that I'm currently seeing, and probably a lot of you have been seeing, is people using AI as like a catch-all. I'm just going to put something in here. I'm going to have it make a LinkedIn post, done, post it, and think, okay, great, I'm building a story and I'm building a brand. And that is where you're seeing, not for lack of a better term, a lot of garbage on the internet of like companies putting just like posts. It's clearly created by AI, or like it you know, there's no soul into it, and you immediately look at it and you're like, this is just a really crappy video, and I can see that it's not real. And now I'm kind of turned off by this brand because they're posting something that clearly shows that they didn't put any thought into it. They just put it into AI, and then they're using whatever comes out. This actually then ends up hurting your brand because there's no authenticity around it. There's no soul into it. And people are looking at it as, okay, they're just trying to do a cheap trick to try and get as many content pieces as they can. And I'm not connecting with this anymore. And I see a lot of people doing this where you can, and you maybe notice it, or at least I can, where you go to a website and you can very easily tell it's just a template from Lovable. Or you go to their Instagram page and the people in the pictures, there's nobody real in any of the pictures anymore. And you can see that these are AI people. And you immediately are like, I don't even know if this is a real brand because I don't know the people behind this. I don't know anything about the story. This just feels like somebody created some random brand on Instagram, and I don't really know if this is real. There's this lack of connection there. What I think people should do, and some brands are doing this really well, and this is where you can kind of use AI to your advantage, is really use AI as an operational like powerhouse. And that requires then really getting clear on all of the things that you want it to understand and providing really key roles. So let's say, for example, you are a solopreneur and you do run a soap business, right? You don't have the ability to hire 5 people yet to help you run your business. Great, that's okay. With AI, now what you can do is you can go into ChatGPT, and let's say you pay, at least I'm in Europe, I'm just going to say euros. So let's say it's 21 euros a month for a ChatGPT premium account. What you can do is then make sure that you're creating GPTs that are well trained in context on, your brand story, which you create yourself as a regular human being. You don't do everything with ChatGPT. You understand what your story is. You understand what your user kind of profiles are. You think about what your mission and values and goals are, the voice of your brand, what you really hope that they feel when they're looking at your things, etc. You think about everything it is that you want and use your own human creativity to kind of navigate that. Maybe you use ChatGPT to help you figure out what are the categories you need to do of those parameters. And then you put that into a GPT or some type of whatever model it is. And then you use that as like a talking, kind of like another person to talk to, right? Rather than it being, okay, automated, everything is in here, you train it on you. You create, again, that context that creates a real kind of support system for what it is, but it's trained on your story. And so what it's then providing is, when it provides, ideas for things that you can post on Instagram, it's still kind of based and trained off of you. And then think about what you're kind of then putting on and ensuring that you as a human are thinking about, okay, well, if I do an Instagram post that's about my story as why I started this, does it really make sense for me to use some image that I generated on Midjourney, or should I just take a picture of myself? There's then the idea of imagine if I'm a customer and I'm trying to tell my story, what is going to be most evocative of that? And use AI as not your automation for everything, but as your tool that then helps you kind of leverage what you already have as your story, as your brand, and kind of create it as like an assistant rather than your CMO, which I think is a problem that a lot of people are doing. That's my long-winded explanation of I think AI is great. I think it can be an amazing tool, but you need to understand that it is not your replacement for everything. It should really be like the conduit that allows you to kind of optimize your things quicker. And if trained well, it can be an amazing, amazing asset.
Yeah, I think there's so much to jump on in that answer, Mayuri. And I mean, in summary, it's like good stuff in, good stuff out. So if we can train the AI, the agents, to be able to understand us and our identity as individuals and as businesses, then we're going to get good output out that is more authentic. So it reminds me of another person that we had on Heavy Chef, our good friend Verity Price. She, for your reference, Mayuri, she was the world champion of public speaking for 2021. She beat I think 40,000 other entrance, and she was the sixth woman in 80 years to win it. Not sure
Wow.
what that's, but then, and then she was the first person from Africa to win it. And, you know, she was after the award, which was huge. I mean, it boosted her into, it catapulted her into like a worldwide echelon of public speakers. And, you know, she travels around the world doing gigs. She chatted to me shortly after that about her personal identity, which needed a little bit of a lick of paint, you know, like the website and the blog and the email and whatnot. And she said to me something I just found so interesting, was that when creating her logo and the strap line and the visual language around her identity and her kind of business, which, you know, she's a solopreneur, she said to me, it has been one of the most painful experiences of my life. And she couldn't understand why. And so it got us into this conversation, which it emerged that there is something really, and you know, anybody who's had to develop a personal identity, I think will resonate with this answer. But it was something about the introspective nature of trying to identify the various components of what makes my identity true.
Yeah.
Because that's hard, right? If we create too much of a gap between the false projection and the true internal, you know, values and the nature that's inherent to our real identity, that gap becomes very apparent. And all of a sudden, you have to play act the whole time. And so there's this process whereby it almost feels like it has to be a little bit hard. It has to be a little bit difficult. If we as entrepreneurs are just putting prompts into an AI and out pops an identity, out pops a, you know, lovable website, or you know, we put a little link to the world's first AI actress. I mean, that's mildly terrifying, you know?
Yeah.
So
it's mildly, I'm freaking out. It's weird.
I know, it's so strange. And by the way, if anyone is interested, go and check out Casey Neistat's video about slop. It's hilarious and frightening. But Louis from Pretoria has asked the question, with all of this as a background, how do I find my story? What are some ways that we can introspect in that sort of, in a way, like a painful way, to find our story?
That's a really great question as well. It's a great question, so I'm loving this. Okay, so, well, for starters, I think that one thing that I've done before is I've actually just practiced telling my own story. So, for example, that could be like writing it out. So one of the things that I like to do is actually just write out, like, what is my story? What do I want my story to be? So I think about it from the standpoint of, sometimes we think about our story as like we are at the end of the story, but we're actually in the midst of it, right? So we are like, we kind of think, okay, all right, my story is what's already happened to me, but in actuality, you kind of craft how what has happened to you is part of your story or not. So let's say, for example, I could say, you know, I got laid off from my job, and like that, you know, that then just, I decided that that was going to be the reason why I was going to start a company, build my own thing, da 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 da. Or that could be the reason why I got really sad, decided I was going to move back to Seattle, give up on my dream of living in Europe, and, you know, do something else. We're in the midst of our story right now, so you can kind of, what's cool about having a story is that you are crafting it. You are currently in process of deciding what has happened in your past and how it's going to shape your future, or what future you want to build from that. So one of the things that I would do if I'm just trying to figure out my story as an individual, not from a business perspective, not like, let's start with that. Like, let's start as, who are you? Who do you want to be? What kind of life do you want to live? So one of the things that I've done is I've actually written out my like life story. Like, oh, like Mayuri was a person who grew up in Seattle, da, 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 all this stuff, and she really cared about these types of things, and that kind of changed into a person she was. And it actually requires me to reflect on my life. Like, okay, what did my year in Australia, you know, why did I do that, right? Like, you know, at the time I just thought, okay, like, I just want to live abroad for a year. You know, I just want to live abroad for a year and then I'm going to move to New York and da da da. But living in Australia for a year is the reason why I was like, "Ah, I think I got to live in Europe next." Like, and it changed the trajectory of my life in such a big way. But at the time, it did not seem like a very pivotal thing, right? Even right now, let's say, for example, this moment right now of us having this call on Heavy Chef, I might, you know, yesterday I might have been like, oh, I'm having a call on Heavy Chef and it's going to be a great thing to reconnect with Fred and Mo and revisit the conversation we had in February. Wonderful, amazing, great. I have no idea what this could actually mean for my story. Somebody could see this and it could like lead to something else. And this could be a pivotal moment in my story. And I have absolutely no idea right now. So what I would do is I would look back at like write your life story as if you are a 10-year-old writing a book report about who is Mayuri, or who is Jillian, or who is Fred, right? And write that out first and just kind of look back at your own life and think about, I wonder where these pivotal moments happened that I didn't even see coming. And then think about what you want your story to be. Okay, so what do you want these moments in your life to kind of lead to? What are your goals? Like I know it sounds so type A, it's insane, but I have a Google document, a Excel document with all of my life goals, categorized by health. I know I sound like a maniac, but with health, professional, family, like love, all of these things. And like, I mean, like start a B Corp, you know, find a partner that I love, da, 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 like everything written down. And then I have a column where it's like, how I am working towards this in the next month. What are the things that I've done? And it's step by step. I know that sounds insane, but these are actually like writing everything down, and people call it manifestation, whatever, but it really isn't. It's actually just training your brain to think about, okay, well, if the end of my life, the story to be, I did these things, I need to figure out what are the things I need to do in the interim to get closer to that story, that happy ending of a life that I want to have, right? And so one part of it is going back and looking back at your life and reflecting on how those things happened. That's a huge part of your own storytelling. And then the other part is looking at how do you want what's happened in your past to then be part of your future story. That's how I would kind of frame the storytelling aspect from that perspective. And then if you're looking at it from a business perspective, okay, how do I figure out my story as an entrepreneur and how I tell that externally? I would think about the business that you've started and really, again, going back to, you know, Simon Sinek's why, which I still think is a really great kind of framework of like, why is it that you want to solve this problem? What is it that wakes you up every morning? So if you're selling, if you create an AI language learning app, okay, like it's not just that you, I mean, maybe it is that you want to make a lot of money from building this app out. Awesome, great. But the why might be, I want to make a world where, you know, people are no longer feeling left out of conversations because they just simply don't know the language, right? Which might be a really great why for me as somebody who moved to Berlin not knowing German. But getting back to that core belief, and then you can build your kind of narrative around that, being like, oh, I moved to Berlin and this is da, da, da. And it's very easy because you've already kind of written that out. So that's how I would do it. I would look in the past, kind of write out your own story. Then I would look to the future of your goals and then see how those then can kind of come together to help you create a story that you also know as a person, but then can also kind of navigate professionally as you tell your story to, you know, your consumers or to, you know, investors and things like that.
I love that, Mayuri. It's such a practical framework. And by the way, I'm a huge fan of frameworks. I think it's great. I think there's something so helpful about having something like a scaffolding within which, particularly for entrepreneurs, you know, we generally tend to live in a world of chaos. There's so many external factors that buffet us, like winds of change all the time.
Yeah.
And so sometimes it feels, you know, quite overwhelming because, you know, there's a lot of things in South Africa. We've been decimated by, you know, tariffs, and, you know, we have all kinds of, you know, infrastructural challenges that, you know, is fairly unique to South Africa. And so having a framework is really important. And, you know, there's lots of research around from basic perspective, you know, you call it manifesting, but And there's also a scientific methodology behind it. There's that famous basketball study that was done around, the 3 focus groups: the ones who didn't train at all, the ones who trained, just shooting hoops. And the third group was the one that visualized shooting the hoops and getting swishes. And the one that, trained and visualized just outshot the others by something like 35% or something ridiculous. Yeah. And there was this, it was the consequence of manifesting, but actually it was visualizing. And I think the idea, your framework of looking to the past for the story, the true story of what has happened, it's an objective truth, versus the future story, which is a subjective truth, which essentially puts something on the horizon. There's something that I believe is also, scientifically valid in terms of when we define that which we want to achieve, those things naturally come into focus. They are on our radar. In the same way that if you buy a car, if you look for a car, you'll see that car everywhere, So or like you hear a song that you hadn't heard before, you hear it everywhere. That's how it works, right? And,
yeah, you're primed for it.
Exactly, you're primed for it. And so it's really important that we put something on the horizon, that we have something that we're working towards. And I think that's really, really, really important. Louis says, yeah, it doesn't have a how I built this story. I'm sure Guy Rice would agree. So Mayuri, I think then, we've spoken about AI and all of this, and I want to know, there's something around that introspective pain that is, it's congruent with the introspective asking ourselves of questions that is important to get to the truth, which then is liberating, right? It liberates us to be able to act with impunity, speak with impunity, to say the things because they are true, right? As opposed to, selling something that's not true. So I want to know from you, who, in your view, are the companies, and they can be big or small businesses, anybody that comes to mind, are there businesses that you see in your radar that essentially are true, that are inspiring, that have told a good story in amongst all this Casey Neistat is the slop that is out there?
Yeah, I'm gonna bring one that comes to mind quickly that I've just been looking at what they've been doing lately, and I really love it. It's an organization here in Berlin called Clicky. And the woman who started it, she is a entrepreneur from Munich, and she moved to Berlin, and she realized she missed her friends. And so she started this community where she does dinners where women can meet one another. They buy a ticket, and then they have an opportunity to meet other women who are also trying to meet new people. And what she's done incredibly well is her story of who she is and what she wanted to create is so seeped into not just all their communication, it's also just so authentic when you speak to her. She is exactly what it is that she is coming off of from her brand. So you immediately meet her and you're more bought into what she is building because of that. And I say this because I'm sure every single one of us has met somebody of their external persona does not match the person that you meet, right? And that's really easy in today's world. Your social media can make you look like, oh, I'm this and this and this, and then you meet the person and you're like, that was the person that I've been looking up to for God knows how many years. I mean, the whole phrase "never meet your heroes" is, I think, a pretty big example of this. Is something that a lot of people have seen over time, right? And what I think is very clear is that and again, why I resonate with her, and I think why I think the people who win in the future are going to be like that, is that we as human beings, again, can very quickly tell if somebody is authentic. It's harder to do that on social media because we are getting a very, what's the word? Crafted, or there's another word for it, but a very crafted version of that person, right? But when you meet them in person, if they don't kind of match up to that, then you immediately kind of lose trust. So what I would say is, when you're building like an authentic brand, understand that like you can't just like build an authentic brand or what you think people want to see online and then have that not translate to the actual person that you are, because people, you won't be able to keep up with it, and over time it actually will be really exhausting. So what I would say is the lesson from that is when you are doing this introspective work about what kind of brand it is that you want to be, really do the work to navigate who it is that you actually are and working from that point, rather than like, if tomorrow is like, hey, I'm going to create a brand where it's all about like prestige this and like, trying to navigate luxury in a different way or whatever, like that would not, I would not be able to last as a brand like that, because that is not who I am. And so really making sure that, again, your story of who it is that you want to be is authentic, and then kind of translating that. That is what I've seen in most brands that I really resonate with, because you can't fake that. And what I've seen is also is that those brands then endure because they are true to what they are. Another great example is Ben and Jerry's. I think Ben and Jerry's is probably one of the most famous ones of Ben and Jerry, like the guys who started the ice cream, really built their brand on creating really great ice cream, but also stood really strong with their values about equity, about creating a better world. And to the point where like they have both been very vocally against what has been happening in Israel and Palestine, even though they are themselves getting a lot of flack for it. They've been arrested. And I believe Jerry actually left Ben & Jerry's, his own company, which is now owned by Unilever, because the brand was not representative of what it is that he believed in. That is an incredible like story. First of all, their story is incredible, but like how much respect do you have for him as a person and what it is that he stands for, knowing that he left his own brand because it no longer aligned with what he believed in. And I think, again, like people are going to resonate with that because they see that their brand online or whatever their message is exactly who they are as a person. And I think that, again, those are the types of brands that you always think about, or they really, really stick with you because there's that consistency in that message.
Yeah. I love that. It's again, there seems to be a thread that, from the start of this conversation to now, it seems to be around truth, and truth is, a friend of mine said, it's like a diamond. You can look at truth, every angle that you look at it, it looks different, right? So we have to decide what is the, true for us internally, and then be able to confidently speak that truth externally. And an example would be a Heavy Chef. You spoke about a core belief and how important that is to a story. And for us, our core belief is that entrepreneurs can change the world for the better. Now, not everyone believes in that. If you're like a socialist, for example, maybe that's not so true for you. Maybe it's about state-owned control and having, a universal basic income and everybody gets the same. Maybe that's true for you. But for us, we're putting our colors to the mast, and we're saying, we believe in the free market, and we believe one of the fastest, most efficient ways of creating wealth in a poor economy is to empower those people who have the ability to trade, to create, to transact, to be able to sell, to tell stories, and to be able to make a life of meaning and purpose for themselves. And there's no more creative way than doing it than entrepreneurship, right? So there's a lot of people who disagree with me on that, and it's okay. I think there's part of this which we have to accept, that we're going to polarize people, and we're going to, we're going to have people who don't necessarily agree with us. There's a great question here from Jillian. She says that she's a solopreneur, and you're in a safe place here, Jillian. we're also hell's idealistic, but she says, I believe in your personal story because building strong relationships and connection is really important. And so the however here is navigating the cutthroat environment of corporate. Those folks often, they don't want the fluff. They just want to get straight to the details of the line items and the KPIs and all that kind of stuff. So how do we find a balance in being authentic to identity and then also fitting in with this business environment? And I guess that's the navigating the story and the narrative into the practicalities.
Oh, it's interesting because I feel like this topic has come up a lot with, I have to say a lot with people that I work alongside in terms of my friends who are, in their careers, who have been professionals, directors at large companies, or who are building their own business. And I have to say, mostly from women. I think this is also a topic where women are not necessarily allowed the same amount of room to be able to possess different traits that are seen as like masculine traits that are usually more respected in a lot of different business environments, particularly when you're looking at it from the standpoint of, if we want to get investments, women are getting a very small fraction of any type of VC investments, even a much smaller fraction of that if you're a woman of color. I think it's like 0.3%. It's very, very low. And so this topic of like, how do I show up? Do I show up in the way that they want me to, they would expect me to come in, or do I show up in a way that is proven more fruitful for other demographics? What is the way to do that? And this is something I've struggled with as well. I'm a very outspoken person. I have a very clear values of what I believe in. And I tend to be somebody who stands up to authority, which is probably the reason why I love being a consultant, because I'm allowed to then provide that authority and I'm being paid for it. In this situation, what I would say is, this is a decision that you need to make for yourself about what it is your hard lines are, like your boundaries are in terms of the type of work that you want to do, what it is that the things that you won't compromise on, the things that you're okay to deal with, and the things that you're not okay to deal with. Example, like you could be in a situation where, you don't like the way that someone is communicating with you, or you think their tone is off. That might not be a battle that you want to fight, because hey, this person might be kind of a jerk, but I want to be able to work with this investment firm and the people who are around this said jerk. It's worth it to deal with him to be able to get the other resources that are there. Now, if the same person is being discriminatory to your core demographic and they kind of echo statements of that entire firm, I would say that that's not really something where you could really kind of go around that and find a balance with that. That is demonstrating a complete different set of values that is not going to be fruitful for you. Over time, you're going to not feel good working with them. You're also, clearly they don't respect the people that you're serving. So what I would say is, I kind of think that there's, in the same way that Beyonce has Sasha Fierce, you might want to create a persona for yourself that is still authentic to who it is that you are, but you don't need to show every single bit of who you are either. I think that this might be controversial to say, but I think that it is okay to not show every single bit of who you are in a work context. You do not owe that to anybody that you're working with. You do not have to do that. But you should know who your identity is to be able to know what those lines that you're not willing to cross are. So if you want to show up in a work environment and not present every single bit of yourself, you can still be authentic to who you are without having to show everything. And I think that that's the kind of conversations a lot of women in particular I've been having with, of you don't owe all of that to a company. You can still be authentic without showing everything. And so decide what it is that you are feeling comfortable presenting when you're talking to customers or investors or partners. And the other thing I would say is, if you are building a team around you of investors or partners, just keep in mind that the people who are on your cap table or the people who you're working with, they're going to be around you for the next at least 10 years. You need to make sure that they're people that you want to work with, and don't try to fit yourself to kind of try and force yourself to make it work with people who are not going to support your business. I hope that answered your question, but also feel free to jump in and clarify in case I didn't.
Julian says, I literally left my corporate career because the values did not align with my value set, and I could no longer look that. So here I am, this idealistic.
Hey, I think this world and everything that is good was built off of idealists. Like, You have to, like,
100%. I mean, it's the fuel of the entrepreneur, right? Hope, optimism, idealism, creativity, innovation, all of those things are in lockstep with each other, because we cannot start a business if we don't have faith, if we don't have a certain sense of idealism and optimism. If we don't, there is zero chance we would actually start a business, because why unless you're actually, unless you believe you're going to fail, right? So I mean, it's almost like there's something cultish, even if you don't want to admit it. There's something around that idealism that leads us into this kind of area, this shady area of, even if we're a business of one, of like there is a cult element to it. And by the way, cult, I think the root word of cult is the same as culture, which it literally means to care. So it's to care for one another and so on and so forth. So let's normalize cult. Because
I think you take the entire conversation, normalize cults. Yeah, that's it.
It's about caring, and it leads me to the next question, I think. And by the way, I wanted to make just a quick additional point around, certainly with Heavy Chef, something that we've noticed in our own. So, I mean, we're a small business ourselves, right? So I mean, we're growing fast, but at the same time, we consider ourselves a startup, and we're scrappy, and we have this growing community. But the reality is, the story is also iterating as we go. So the original story that we have, although the spine is still true, which is entrepreneurs change the world for the better, and content, community, capital, these are learn, do, share. These are our maxims, but that's the scaffolding within which we're playing around with our story and seeing what really sticks and what remains true. There's almost this process of casting the net out and pulling it back in and seeing what is still in the net, And that's so important for us to be able to take the lean startup method, even and the scientific method, or whatever you want to call it, to our own story, and really seeing what resonates both with us internally and with our community externally. And speaking of community and cults, I want to know from you, Mayuri, how do we then translate, if we're comfortable with our own story internally, and now we want to build, I think we agree that community is really important, because we know people are forming a community around your brand. That's good for everything, right?
Yeah.
How do we then thread a story into community in a way that feels real, that is authentic? I don't know if you have any thoughts around community and storytelling, how
100%.
to get people to adapt to that.
Yeah, so I mean, I'll start with like the way that I view community. So again, community, I feel like is the new buzzword being thrown around in every single startup that you are coming across even now. Community is also being, I think, in some circles, misconstrued as just like the people who use your product, and that's not really what it is, right? I think it's used interchangeably of like, oh, there are customers, there are community, and that's actually not it. So when you're thinking about your community, again, these should be either your entire customer base, or maybe it's a part of your customer base that is connected to one another based on a shared experience or a shared value, or something that allows them to connect to one another because there's something that brings them together, or they're in common with one another, right? And so they can find kind of solace with one another. If you are trying to build a community around your product, that actually has to kind of happen over time, and it's organic, right? Like it comes from building trust. So community is actually, we talk about brand as a really important competitive mode. I'd say community is maybe even more effective, because if you have a community, you cannot replicate that. That takes time. It takes a lot of effort. It takes energy to really understand the people and help them feel connected to one another, and then also feel connected to your brand in a way that allows them to say, hey, I want to keep coming back and buying A, B, and C product. When I think about community in terms of how to tell your story, look at it from the perspective of like, the people who are in your community are the people who, again, resonate with your story enough that they want to learn more about it, right? So they're the people that really see the value in what you're doing and want to stay closer to you in another way, or want to actually dive deeper into that. So for example, if you use the example of, again, this soap brand. I'm actually going to use an example of a specific soap brand that's called Euganics. It's a founder that I spoke to actually on my podcast. Her name is Joan. And Joan created a soap that actually is a deterrent for mosquitoes. And the soap itself is incredible in that it's very low cost. But the really kind of incredible USP is that actually deflects mosquitoes. And there's been like an 86% reduction in the amount of malaria cases in the area that use this soap. Incredible, incredible product. And she's just such an incredible human being. Her story started as she learned about social entrepreneurship through this program called SINA, which started in Kampala, Uganda. And she was raised in an orphanage and basically got malaria a lot when she was younger, and then kind of used that knowledge to then decide to start this business when she was 18 years old. If she were to try and build a community around her product, she could really start with, let's say, for example, people that have been affected by malaria, right? People who are constantly affected by malaria, and use that kind of circle of like, okay, great, you have this soap. Now, what are some other things that we can do for one another, right? Like maybe there are other remedies that we can share that help you if you do contract it again, or long-term effects or symptoms. What are some things that you guys have all been going through where we can connect on that? Or maybe there are people who've lost people to malaria and they want to actually be a community to help more people know about this, so less people are affected by malaria. And finding people who have a similar story in themselves so that they then create their own community around your product. So for example, Jillian, I don't know what it is that is your product, but let's say your product is, geared towards other folks who have left corporate careers. Maybe the way that you start building your community is around telling your own story of like the hardships that you went through when leaving your company and how that affected your life, and you connect to other people who are trying to leave their corporate career and are then creating a bond with one another. And so the idea is you use your story as maybe your base, but you can find subsets of people that might want to connect with others around that story, or what resonated within your story, as the way to kind of build a deeper connection with them that allows them to be not just people who feed you, but that you also then learn from them of like, what are the things that you could do to create a bigger brand, or what are the things that they want? And then the community becomes kind of co-creators in what it is that you want to do. And I think that's the big part, is community allows you to have a co-creation aspect with your business that allows your product to grow, but also allows you to understand a better, long-term vision for what you could actually build. So it allows them to be part of the story as well.
I love that. Co-creation of the story is fantastic. And it also encourages, it's something that I guess Heavy Chef has not necessarily been great at in terms of in the last little while. I mean, we're good at capturing stories in terms of recipes, and dicing and slicing them up and providing them to our audience. But we have not been great at actually profiling the kind of, the successes and the outcomes and the real kind of narratives. And so we have in the past 6 months really kind of turned our lens to profiling individuals who have done our programs and who've been through the courseware that we create. And what's happened is a form of co-creation. There's a real co-creation in terms of how we're shifting our narrative. And it's, I mean, I don't want to oversell it, but it's in this book, this thing of we are not, Heavy Chef is not the hero here. We, in the framework that we purport, like we are the kind of the Yoda, the Gandalf, the sage, and the hero is, the Bilbo or the Luke Skywalker or, the Wonder Woman or whatever. Like that is the entrepreneur. And so we need to try and tell better stories around that. I've got about 50 more questions for you, but we've got 2 more minutes, Mayuri. So I have one more question for you. Well, two. I'm going to sneak one in, but the just one thing, I guess. Well, let's smush them together into one question. You're a podcaster, you're a consultant, you're a storyteller, you have this, you're a polymath, you have this multiple levels of skills that you're able to provide for your clients and your community. How do you keep your story, and in doing so, which was the second question, tell us how we can get hold of you. Like, how can we see more of you? How can we get to your podcast and I think enrich ourselves with more of the wisdom and the strategy that you're building up over time. But how do you slice and dice that? How do you divvy that up into the vast array of platforms that are available to us? Your story, in terms of how you've created and shaped your narrative.
So I don't want to pretend that I know everything about what my story is or the rest of my life, but I will say one thing that I kind of go back to a lot is there's this I saw this one phrase like months ago, and I keep going back to it, and it's like, if your life was a movie, what would the audience be screaming at the screen right now? And I love going back to that, because sometimes when I'm in my, like, if I'm feeling kind of frustrated or like I don't know what I'm doing, and I like think about it, I'm like, this is the part of the movie where like I'm supposed to give up, and then I just keep going, or this is the part of the movie right before the big break, or whatever it might be. And like, what I do is I think about, again, like my life is this bigger story, and it helps me understand, like, okay, what is it that I'm supposed to do right now if that was the story I wanted to tell? So for me lately, that's meant being really kind of honest and authentic when I meet people. Like, I do not shy away from telling people what the struggles are of building a business on my own, or, starting a podcast, which, by the way, I love my podcast, but oh my God, it is so hard to edit. I don't know if you've ever edited a podcast before, but it is my ADHD brain. It is not meant for me, but I'm also learning so much from it. I love every aspect of podcasting, minus the part of the editing. But through the part of like doing this, I've come to understand a bit more about myself, and I'm being honest about that with the people that I meet, with how I write on LinkedIn, with what I write on Substack, to be really true to myself and to make sure that the learnings that I'm having, I'm also sharing with others, which feels very authentic to my own kind of purpose, which I feel like is to help people feel less alone within any kind of work that it is that they're doing. And that kind of understanding of my purpose has helped me kind of be more authentic at each kind of phase of how I'm sharing what I'm going through. In terms of my podcast itself, my podcast, just as a quick thing, it's called The Founders Atlas, and I interview founders from different startup ecosystems around the world. And the kind of purpose around that is, I believe that there are so many different ways to run and build really powerful and effective businesses. But as somebody who grew up in the US and who currently lives in Germany, I was only fed narratives that are very Western in terms of sphere, usually very kind of a very specific kind of narrative. And I think there are so many other more incredible stories. And that is the reason why I think that when it comes to my own story, I like to be as authentic as possible. So all to say, whether you're building your own business or you are thinking about leaving the one that you're working at and kind of going out on your own, I think that the core thing to think about is, again, going back to what is the story that I want to tell? What is the story I want to have? And if it helps you, as it helped me, if somebody was watching your life on a movie screen and they were watching you do your life, what would they be screaming at the screen right now telling you to do? And imagining you are the hero of your own story, which you are, and kind of operating life from that way.
I love that. That's such a cool analogy. What would they be screaming? I've got a whole bunch of images in my mind right now. So that's certainly something to reflect upon on my post-discussion coffee that I'm about to make. Mayuri, you're an absolute gem. Thank you so much. It's been such a treat to chat with you, and there's been a great there's like a golden thread of truth. Try and ask the hard questions in terms of, what is true to us, and what would resonate with our audience. What is our audience of the movie screaming at us, and what else? Oh, normalize cults. So that'll be the headline of tomorrow's meeting. Normalize cults.
Normalize cults,
so,
yeah.
Mayuri, we're going to let our community know that your recipe is live. Well done. You did so great. And thank you again for the beautiful work that you do. And we look forward to seeing you back in Cape Town soon.
Yes, I hope so. And also, if anybody would like to connect with me on LinkedIn or has any questions that come up, I'm just putting my LinkedIn here as well. Please connect with me. I love speaking with founders. I love speaking with folks, and would love to chat with you further.
Cool. Well, thanks to everybody who invited to join the call, and thanks to everybody who decides to watch this from the greater community. And peace out, everybody. Have an awesome weekend. Take care, Mayuri.